On today's show, Ty Lue allegedly has a conversation with Gilbert Arenas and says that Russell Westbrook is our leader and we didn't have a leader before him. What does that mean about the Clippers' leadership? How do we even define leadership in the basketball world? And in this episode, going to be looking at Russell Westbrook's leadership style, what he's done for the Clippers, and the leadership, or lack of it, from 2-1-3 Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Going to be talking about that on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, going into my 19th season as a Clipper fan this fall. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod and subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more LA Clipper, LA Sports, NBA and NBA history content. And Locked On Clippers is free and available on all your favorite podcast platforms, including YouTube, where I want you to let me know what you think of Ty Lue's comments. And of course, this is all coming from Agent Zero, Gilbert Arenas, who obviously was a former All-Star in the NBA in the 2000s. And my first couple of years getting into basketball, he was one of the better point guards in the league. And when I say point guards, I mean the point guards the way we define it now, just players playing the point guard position, because he was not traditional by any means. He was a score-first guy, and he could light it up. But as far as his basketball takes, that's another conversation. He has some good ones, and he has some bad ones. I don't tend to respect what he says after he called Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman little dudes, which that just makes no sense, because those are the type of guys that you'd want in today's NBA to like switch onto everybody, is Dennis Rodman and Scottie Pippen type builds, like those 6'7", 6'8" wing players that are athletic. So that was an insane comment to make, like as if everybody's like super bulky now and Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman were like twigs or something. I thought that was pretty funny. But this is not a basketball take. This is, he said he had a conversation with Ty Lue. Why would he lie about that, right? I mean, he probably knows Ty Lue personally to a degree, and I don't think he would just lie on his show and just make stuff up, because at the end of the day, Ty Lue can always come out and say, that's BS, I never said that, stop lying on my name, Gil. But he's not, because obviously I think there's some truth to it. And what he said was, well, Gilbert Arenas initially asked, why did Russell Westbrook not get any money? Why did he only get that $4 million? And Ty said that's all we could give him. But he really wanted to be here, and I'm happy he is here because he was our leader and we needed a leader. To say that we needed a leader, or we didn't have one before, I forget his exact words that Gilbert Arenas said, but to say those words that we didn't have a leader and whatnot, that, I don't want to say it's a shot to Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, but it just shows what Ty Lue kind of thinks of them as leaders, that they're not really those kind of guys. And before I get into talking about their leadership style, I want to talk about Westbrook. And I think it's very evident, if you've watched basketball for the last 15 years, that Russell Westbrook is a vocal guy to his teammates. He has become a true floor general, in the post-KD era. And, the opinions of Russell Westbrook and the way he runs an offense, those, differ based on who you ask. But he was the floor general for the Oklahoma City Thunder before KD left and after KD left. And he has since put up some of the highest assists per game seasons in recent memory. So Russell Westbrook, he is a point guard. He is a point guard in terms of the way he acts, the way he looks to get everybody's shots, the way he looks to make other players better, and what we hear about him off the court. And I think that's really where this conversation about leadership begins. The thing is, as fans, we're so limited in what we really see with all the conversations that go on in practice and, not even basketball-related conversations, like real human-to-human stuff between these guys that are on the same team. We only see them play basketball. We only see the job when they clock into work. And only some of that work, because they obviously work for practice as well, right? That's part of their job. So, but one thing I noticed about the Clippers since Patrick Beverley left is we have lacked a vocal leader. We have lacked that. Everyone says that the Clippers lacked a floor general and a leader. Well, with Russell Westbrook, we've kind of got two of those things now checked off. Because Russell Westbrook, we saw initially, first off, when it comes to this conversation, we saw what the players all said about him, the Clipper players. Paul George, Marcus Morris, these guys all wanted Russ. And that's for a reason. Especially in Paul George's case, he played with the guy. So clearly, Russ did something when he was playing with Paul George in Oklahoma City that made PG say, I like playing with this guy. I'm so adamant that I like playing with this guy that I'll publicly go on record and say, we need to get him. And it seemed like once we got him, Paul George wasn't really complaining much about anything. Initially, after the bubble, he said he needed more he wanted more touches, playmaking. And now, this past season, he was saying, I don't want to be the playmaker all the time. So Russell Westbrook coming in, it seemed like he really was at ease and was playing some really good ball before the injury against OKC. But I think Russ deserves some credit for that as well. And I also think when it comes to Ivica Zubac, who went on the record and said such great things about Russ after the season, he's the only one, and I've said this multiple times on this show, Russell Westbrook is the only player on the team, in my opinion, that consistently looks to get Ivica Zubac the ball in the post. Consistently looks to get him the ball. Everyone else, they look him off. They treat him like he's a guy with no post game, kind of like DeAndre Jordan. No offense to one of the great players in Clipper history, DeAndre Jordan, but he's the type of guy that you wouldn't feed the ball to in the post. He's got no touch. Ivica Zubac has a great right-handed jump hook over his left shoulder. So I don't know why I may need to ask somebody who has synergy, but what the percentage of those jump hooks are when Ivica Zubac catches the ball around the basket or on the block. I think Russell Westbrook, that's leadership to me. Looking to get guys going, worrying about others, not just yourself, for the good of the team. And I'm not saying Paul George and Kawhi don't necessarily do that, but Russell Westbrook's job as a point guard is to do that. And then there's the vocal part of things, right? I think what Ty Lue is saying is not necessarily that Kawhi and Paul don't have any leadership qualities, but there's different ways to lead. And I think in life, not just in basketball, when we think of leaders, we think of vocal people. I've always been somebody who, when I was growing up, I wanted to be the line leader or the leader of my group in school or just a guy that, I coach now at the youth level. I like being a leader. As a player on the basketball court, I always was talking. I'm talking to you right now for 30 minutes straight. So, you think a podcast guy, I guess that's a funny way to call myself that, but a podcast guy wasn't, I'm a guy that likes to talk. So, I always consider myself a leader kind of guy. I was always put in positions to lead. Russell Westbrook clearly has that about him, and you could see it when he arrived here in Los Angeles with us, of course, when he switched hallways. He immediately, first game, you can see how vocal he is. You can see that it doesn't just stem from what's going on within the players in the roster. It's what he does with the crowd. He's getting everybody going. He's just this vibrant personality that we needed because we lack that. Oftentimes, I always say the Clippers had this too cool for school attitude. When they lose games, even when they get blown out, it's no big deal. I don't see anyone screaming. I don't see anyone yelling. I don't see anybody taking a hard foul. Where's the emotion? Where's the emotion? Where's the passion? That matters to me. You can say you care all you want, but when you are getting absolutely destroyed and there's people, your diehard fans, your community, watching your team get their asses kicked, and you're just no facial expression, no nothing. It's just, just had a bad game. It's just one of those nights. No. Because we could be doing something better, but we care about this team so much that we're taking our time to watch you guys get blown out. And, this Clipper team, when Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are playing, they should never get blown out by anyone. So the expectation with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard is that you are going to compete in every game that you play as a member of this organization. So when I see them getting blown out against Denver like that on national television and Ty Lue is taking them out at halftime, you know why Ty Lue's taking them out at halftime partially? Because he doesn't think that they can respond. He doesn't think they have it that night. And I think One guy that really was this kind of personality for us in previous years was Patrick Beverley. And even on the 2021 team, people want to say all their hate things about Rondo. But when we got Rondo, I would go to games. This guy would be standing up every single possession, talking to people. Like, he was so invested in the game even when he wasn't playing. I thought that was so special about him. And I guarantee that had some effect in the locker room. And it seems like Russell Westbrook has added harmony to the locker room. And I think it's having a vocal guy, having an emotional guy. You need some of that yin and yang with Kawhi and Paul George's business-like approach, so to speak. So Ty Lue, I think he's really referring to a vocal leader. And I do think championship teams need a vocal leader. I don't know what chip teams ever have won a championship without that kind of guy. Let's just start going backwards, right? That's an interesting, that's funny. I got stumped on the first one. Denver Nuggets. I really don't know who the big talkers are in that locker room, but I tend to think that Jokic talks more than we realize. I think he talks to his team, and you see him screaming. Like, you see him on the bench. Like, you see it in the game. He just seems like he doesn't like to talk to media, I'd say. But it seems like, Jokic clearly is a leader, but the way he gets everybody involved, but I also think he's more vocal than we think. So Jokic is clearly a leader vocally as well. And then you go back, you got Draymond Green. And I think Steph Curry is a better vocal leader than people give him credit for. But Draymond Green really is that emotional guy for the Warriors. Bucks, Giannis, absolutely. But even Brook Lopez and Drew Holiday, those guys, they talk. And they're really good team guys. And then you go to LeBron James and Rondo on the same team. And then you have Kyle Lowry, who really was that guy. Marc Gasol even. And then even further back, you still have the Warriors, you have LeBron, you have, with the Spurs, see, those guys lead in a different way. They're a unique example, I'd say. But Tim Duncan, again, he's one guy that talks more than people realize. Like, Tony Parker, I was just watching their Hall of Fame speech, and Tony Parker was saying that Timmy doesn't talk too much, but he just gives you this look, and you know what time it is. Not everyone needs to speak so much. But Tim Duncan, and Manu, these guys, these were leaders. These guys were guys. So we needed a guy like that, and Ty Lue seems to agree. But coming up, what does that say about Kawhi Leonard and Paul George? Does that mean they're not leaders? Going to be talking about that coming up. I got to tell you a little something about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sports book. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. All right, it's time to talk about Kawhi Leonard and Paul George as leaders. So let me just say this. The conversation about leadership is very interesting. I just talked about how I think in life we always look at vocal leaders, but I think there are people that can lead, and they do it by example. They do it by just showing up and doing their job so professionally and so well that it just rubs off on the other guys. And I think you can have that in the NBA and in basketball, but I think you still need some vocal guys. And the biggest example to me of a guy who was a leader that did not talk like that is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. That's the first name to me that comes to my mind. And the thing about Kareem is he didn't win without that floor general guy in Oscar Robertson and Magic. Now, that's not to say that he couldn't, because I really don't know. It's really hard to say given his career trajectory, but he didn't. Maybe he couldn't. I don't know. I've only done extensive research on the first 2 years of Kareem's career, so dime dropper's the place for all that journey. But the point is, when it comes to Kawhi Leonard, and he's not a guy that seems to talk too much. Now, I don't want to get that confused by saying that Kawhi is like this emotionless robot who has no personality. I clearly know I hear what the Clipper players say and what people say about him, that he's pretty funny, he's got a good sense of humor, and he's not as quiet as people think. But people do say that it's not like he's like some chatterbox or something, and he doesn't like talking to the media. He has no social media. He's a business kind of guy. He just likes to get his job done, play ball. He's clearly into music off the court, and making it and producing. Like that album he helped produce last year was awesome. I forget, was it Rod Wave? I forget who was on it with him. But he had a bunch of people on there. So Kawhi, I think there's much more layers to him than we know as a person. And I think that I can hear him on the court. Like, the mics pick up those things. I can hear Kawhi Leonard. He has a distinct voice. He communicates on defense. He communicates on the basketball court in terms of what needs to be done. But he's not a galvanizer. And we know that now. He's not a guy that's going to grab dudes by the bootstraps and say, come on. He's not an emotional guy in the slightest. He's so stoic that every time he smiles, it goes viral. That's, and these people, like Terrence Mann was talking about it on Podcast P, and he was saying that Kawhi has that, he's so funny because he's the type of guy that he says things so, like, with no emotion, that when he says something like poking fun or like trolling or something, it's that much funnier because he doesn't usually, like, he's not a Patrick Beverley, for example, just going off. It's more rare. And I've been around those kind of people where they're funny because they're not trying to even be funny. It's just that they have a certain demeanor about them that when they, have some humor in them, it's that much funnier. I've been around people like that. As to what that means for the leadership conversation, I think Kawhi Leonard is not a galvanizer. And what I mean by that is I don't think he's a vocal leader that's like worried about everybody else and what they're doing. And I want to start out by using an example. When we first got Kawhi, I didn't expect him to be that guy because that's not what I heard from him. Heard about him, I should say. But then I heard the old preferential treatment thing, that he was showing up late to flights, was, having this private, pre-game thing by himself. Now, I don't know. I think that part he may have still been doing in Toronto, but the showing up late stuff, and then Montrezl Harrell going out to the media and just expressing that he feels like guys were getting preferential treatment, and obviously we knew who he was referring to. He may have been more talking to Paul George because he didn't have the Finals MVP resume that he brought with him. But clearly, Montrez, Lou Will, Pat Bev, like, these guys put in major work that previous year to make the playoffs, and they competed every single night. So when they're seeing these two guys come into the team that they kind of revived, get all this love, I don't think that sets the best tone. And I think Kawhi, with the commercials and all the stuff that was associated with that first year, there was an arrogance. Obviously, I don't think it was Kawhi speaking too much about it, but there was an arrogance within the team. And I just don't feel as though anybody led at all. When we're losing a 3-1, we're blowing a 3-1 lead and blowing double-digit leads in every single game, and you don't see any emotional response. You see them in the press conference saying, oh, it just wasn't our night, shots didn't fall, it's going to be okay, we still got another chance. No. Where's the emotion? Are you pissed? You should be. That was my biggest thing with the bubble. It's like, do you guys care? Because I see what people look like when they lose that have emotion and you guys don't seem to have any emotion. I get it. You're in front of cameras. I don't see it on the court. I literally am not seeing it on the court. So when we bowed out in the bubble like that, and Kawhi Leonard was not even putting up 25 shots or didn't even look angry about it, I had a huge problem with that. I had a major problem with that. Then the following year, it felt like he made more of an effort to be vocal. I remember all the articles before the season about how the Clippers lacked leadership, and they were saying that Kawhi and Paul need to lead by example more. And I think they did for the most part in 2021, especially with Kawhi starting up playing the back-to-backs. And I think that was a step forward that, look, I'm not going to do load management, even though I have a knee that's messed up. Eventually, he hurt his foot, ended up doing load management towards the end of the season. But I like that he started out the Ty Lue tenure basically being like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to play every game I can, and I want to show you guys that I'm with y'all, and I'm going to play every game too. As far as Paul George, he seems like a guy that does care about the others on the team and does communicate behind the scenes. On the court, he doesn't sound very vocal. On defense, especially, he often has miscommunications. Like when miscommunications happen on the defensive end for us, a lot of times PG's involved. Kawhi Leonard, not as much, because I think he does a better job communicating on defense. Because I can hear it. I can see his lips moving. Nowadays, we got 1080p. We can see these guys' lips moving on TV. Paul George, I don't think Paul George really makes anyone better per se. I think he's a score-first guy. I think you could say the same thing about Kawhi in ways. But I will say this. I think Paul George does a good job with, having a good relationship with the team and all that stuff. But no reason why I don't think Paul George can be considered a leader. He did lead those Indiana teams, though. But the reason why I don't think he can really be considered a true leader is because you don't even know what Paul George you're going to get. Like, you have a guy saying, I'm the number 2. And he's like, this really pissed me off when he said this in his podcast. But he's like, when why not hitting shots, we're like, oh, man, what do we do now? I get it. He's the best player on that team. And when he's not making shots, that's tough. Dude, you're a 6'9" demigod that can shoot from everywhere on the court with a handle. And you're saying when Y is not missing shots, we in trouble. No. When Y is not missing shots, maybe you should pull your weight and drag the team like you've done on several occasions. But that's the thing. It's just you just don't know what Paul George you're getting. So how can the team really rely on that? You can't. So in my eyes, Kawhi Leonard is a leader to a degree. He leads by example. And he adds a level of seriousness every single time he's on the court. He leads with his body language. He has those moments where he says, give me the ball. He has those moments where you see him get frustrated at somebody else when they don't give him the ball. I think he has some leadership qualities. But you can't have guys that are just not very talkative and not very emotional to me on a championship team. You have to have somebody like that. And Patrick Beverley did serve as that guy for us. He really did. But then we lost him, and I think we've lacked that. And that's why when we brought in Russ, I think that was huge because you can just see the vocalization. You can see him talking to everybody during the game, especially when you're at the game. You can see him, how many ears he's in. And that's a true vocal leader. And for Ty Lue to go out and say, don't get mad at me, by the way, Clipper Nation. You want to get mad at me? Listen to what you're saying about your star players. Talk about Kawhi and Paul aren't leaders. Look, don't hate me. Hate Ty Lue. He spends 10 times, 100,000 times more time with them than me. And he said we didn't have a leader. He said that in a private conversation, not on camera. Allegedly. And I believe it. So, and I think if you watch I think it's so funny. People will say, yeah, you're not there. There's so much we don't see behind the scenes. I just said it in the episode. But watching 82 games of an organization, watching the way they act, watching the way they talk in press conferences, hearing a couple things here and there, and watching them on the court, you can see what's good. Like, this is 2023. This is not like 1970 where we get 10 nationally televised games a year. You may have to watch a lot of games on the radio. There's not a bunch of coverage 24/7 on the NBA. It's not like that. We can see all these things unfold in front of our eyes. So, you saw what Westbrook did in terms of that part of the team. But coming up, what's the expectation for this season as far as leadership goes? What do I want to see? Going to be talking about that to close coming up. All right, so the expectation now. What do I expect from these guys? Well, first off, I want them to stay healthy. That has nothing to do with leadership, but I want them to stay healthy. Because the thing is, I really find it funny when Clipper fans say, oh, what really needs to change is our role players need to get better. Okay, you can always have your role players get better, but how do you really know how deficient you are as a team when you don't see the finished product play when it counts? Like, yeah, Nicholas Batum declined last season, but you're really telling me, like, Batum, man, like all these Zubats, these guys aren't good enough when Kawhi and Paul George aren't even playing. So how can we really evaluate it? At the end of the day, role players, you need great role players to win championships, but I think we have a lot of great role players. I just think we don't have the stars that you need to win championships healthy when it counts more than anything. I just don't know how we can judge them like that. I think we can judge them on their performance throughout the season, but to say they're not good enough to be in our rotation for a championship team unless it's blatantly obvious, like with Reggie and Marcus Morris, then like guys like Nico, okay, he's a little inconsistent shooting the ball and he's lost a step on D. He's still a very solid player. a player that we're going to probably have in our rotation next year if he's still with us. Robert Covington. He's been on a lot of playoff teams. Like, you're telling me that he's some guy that's incapable of being in a rotation of winning a championship? How do we know that? So, in terms of the expectation, I want to see Kawhi Leonard and Paul George try to play every game. In Paul George's case, try to play every game, which he does for the most part already. That's the first step of leadership. You got to be available. And then Kawhi Leonard, I know he's not going to play back-to-backs, and that's fine. But the games that are not back-to-backs, he should be playing them all. And then as far as their leadership, just lead by example. When it's time for Paul George to be that guy, he needs to be that guy. When Kawhi Leonard load manages or doesn't play, Paul George needs to lead by example. I'm not asking him to talk to everybody, worry about, I need to get Nico an open shot. I need to get Zoo a dump down. Just lead by being you, by being the scorer that we need. Let Westbrook do all the vocal stuff, the talking to everybody, the emotional leadership, the keeping tabs on everyone to make sure they're good. That stuff, the constant communication, that's why we brought Westbrook in. So my expectation is let Russ do his thing and to have that emotion. Like, there was no game I watched this season besides there was one in Golden State where we got absolutely destroyed. First 5 games of Russ, though. But after that, there was no game where I just saw no heart from Russ in the sense that, okay, we're getting our butts kicked, but someone's going to go out there and try to make something happen. Someone's going to show some fight, some emotion. Emotional leadership is a thing in sports. You need someone like that, to me. If you disagree, I would love to hear your reasoning. But I think you do need someone like that. And Westbrook is that guy. And to have him from the start of the season next year is going to be awesome. Because Reggie Jackson, Kawhi, and Paul, they're just very, go with the flow guys. Get buckets, clock in, that's it. Russell Westbrook is, he's bouncing before the game. He's running before the game. He's looking at the crowd. Like, this is a guy that just seems to love what he's doing. Not to say the other guys don't, but you really feel that Westbrook loves basketball, loves the team atmosphere, and I love that about him because it's relatable. But let me know what you think about the whole leadership conversation. This is all coming from Gilbert Arenas saying that Ty Lue told him that we didn't have a leader. So what does that tell you about Kawhi and Paul George? And what Ty Lue thinks of them in that sense. Again, I still think there's other ways you can lead, and I think Kawhi Leonard is a lead by example guy. And I think to have the highest winning percentage ever is not coincidence. I think he sets a tone. I know this sounds cringy to some people, but he has an aura about him. He adds seriousness, and he does to the whole crowd even when we're at the games. I remember going to games, like we're comparing when Kawhi plays to when he doesn't. There's a level of respect that all the neutrals, the many neutrals and Laker fans in disguise that go to Clipper games, because it's an affordable ticket, have for Kawhi as opposed to everyone else. It's like, this guy's a champion, As Shaq says, G14 classifications. But anyway, that's it for me today, guys. Let me know what you thought of the episode. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod. Subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more LA Clipper, LA sports, and NBA history content. And Locked On Clippers is free and available on all your favorite podcast platforms. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, hit the notification bell, hit the comment section, and let me know what you think of the whole ordeal. The age-old proverb continues. Oh, by the way, on tomorrow's Locked On Clips, the NBA schedule will be released. We're going to be looking at that opening night, what we got on tap, how many back-to-backs, relevant conversations, how many matinee games. Last season at the Staples Center, going to be talking about all that on the next Locked On Clippers. But for now, the age-old proverb continues. Go Clippers.